Joining me now, NBC News Capitol Hill producer and reporter Alex Moe, NBC News Capitol Hill producer and reporter Frank Thorpe, and associated producer also on the NBC News Capitol Hill team, Mariana Sotomayor. This is the great team that brings you all the news from the Hill every day. Thanks, guys, for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Alex, you cover the House, so let's start there. What is the landscape going to look like for the president, quite frankly? He hasn't necessarily won his recent fights with Nancy Pelosi.
I think it's going to be really interesting and a very busy year. We'll see how Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump are going to interact. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of investigations on the Hill, and Nancy Pelosi is going to be the one that kind of oversees all of them. I think, we'll wait and see what happens with his tax returns. I think that's going to be one of the big things that a lot of Democrats want to see. Will, the Ways and Means Committee be able to uncover Donald Trump's tax returns? I don't think we're going to see that in 2019. I think that process is going to start. But I think, the Oversight Committee is going to be another place to really watch. There's going to be a ton of investigations. Elijah Cummings, the incoming chairman, just in December, sent 51 letters to the administration encouraging them to, comply with all their requests. And so it's going to be very busy. Yes.
now he's going to have a little more power than that.
Right. The subpoena power that Democrats are going to get is one of the biggest things, I think, that from them winning the House, they're going to be able to be that check and balance on the administration that, a lot of people say Republicans did not do these first 2 years.
Yeah. Frank Thorpe, you cover the Senate. Let's talk for a second about kind of the flip side of this, which is while as more Democrats have come onto the Hill and who are going to be very critical of the president, we're losing some key voices in his own party that have been willing to stand up and fight back against the president.
Yeah, we are. And Senator Bob Corker, who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and Senator Jeff Flake, both of those senators are leaving. Those are two of the most vocal critics of the president from the Republican Party. And so the question is, for a lot of us, is who's going to fill that void? Who's going to be that critical Republican voice? And actually talked to both of them, and both of them actually named Mitt Romney as one of those choices. So it's Mitt. Mitt is definitely a possibility here. They're looking to him to kind of be a critical voice. He just got elected, so he has nothing to lose. I mean, he's not looking.
He's got 6 years before he's got to worry about it.
On the flip side, somebody who's now not going to be running for election, Lamar Alexander, Republican from Tennessee, is also one that both of them named as possible critics. There's one third.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. He's, of course, somebody who we don't necessarily talk about him a lot on the show, but he's someone that's been in politics a long, long time, was education secretary, very serious policy mind.
Right. And he's been pretty moderate on the health care issue. I mean, he's been very critical of the idea of just ripping off the ACA. He's been wanting to get some kind of compromise on that. So his last 2 years actually could be very interesting. The third also is Martha McSally. I mean, she's coming in and she needs to run for re-election in a moderate state in 2 years. Now, she's going to have to thread a needle. Jeff Flake was telling me that, it was a situation where she's going to have to be able to thread a needle where she has to be critical of Trump and win a primary, but also be able to stiff arm him and win a general. So it's going to be a really interesting question to see who's going to fill that void.
Yeah, Mariana, let's also talk for a second here about another dynamic that is going to be super fun, in my opinion, which is that half the U.S. Senate seems to be running for president on the Democratic side.
Definitely more on the Senate side.
There's like a new one every day. I think Michael Bennet from Colorado, who is not somebody who appears in these lovely graphics that we make with all of the various faces, but let's see, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the people in that little graphic are all sitting members of Congress. How do we expect this dynamic to affect policy and what's going on Capitol Hill?
Well, all of these people have big personalities, right? And they're really going to try and define themselves in different ways. I think in the last year, you saw them voting together against any type of Trump nominee. And now you can probably see that going forward, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to try and fight him on that. But I think in terms of the caucus itself, because they are going to try and differentiate themselves, they're going to try and win over the same base, more or less.
They're going to be fighting with each other.
Exactly. They're going to be fighting with each other. So there may be a lack of unity on some key votes. We don't know necessarily what they're going to be voting on next year, but it could be a little hard for Chuck Schumer, especially to try and get his base together. So it'll be definitely interesting to see how that's going to play out, especially on the Senate floor, where they're just going to be, giving every speech that they can.
Right. Well, and Frank, that's, I'm interested to see if they're all tripping over each other to come out first and strongest against the president on whatever he's tweeted that day.
Yeah, well, I think, and I mean, the thing is that, I was talking about Republicans critical of the president. I mean, Democrats are going to be basically running to the cameras. We've seen recently, Elizabeth Warren has been talking to cameras all of a sudden. I mean, she would never talk to us before. It only took how many years? It almost took, it only took an upcoming potential presidential run for her to start talking to us. So, yeah, they are going to be tripping over us, or tripping over themselves to talk to us. And I think that, as Mariana said, it's the key for them is trying to differentiate themselves, and that's going to be really hard.
So, Alex, my question for you is, are they going to actually be able to get anything major done in the next year in Congress? I mean, there has been some conversation for basically since the president took office about a major infrastructure bill, for example. Do you think any of that is actually going to move?
I think that is a great question. I would say probably unlikely, especially when you think about how many investigations House Democrats are going to be launching into President Trump. It's hard to see that they're going to come to the table and agree on something like infrastructure and work in a bipartisan way. But they also were able to just get criminal justice reform done at the end of December. So I think anything is possible, but I'm going with probably unlikely.
I think that senators members of Congress are looking at that criminal justice reform passage and how bipartisan that was, and how much, President Trump backed that bill, and it passed so overwhelmingly in the Senate, and it passed in the House. And so it's a situation where I think that they're looking at this and like, okay, maybe we can actually get something done if we kind of throw down our arms and agree on some policies.
Right. I guess it will take potentially the president embracing something that members from both parties have been working on. We'll see if any of that can happen with divided government and the first year of what's likely to be a 2-year presidential race. Alex Moe, Frank Thorpe, Mariana Sotomayor, thank you all so much for being here.